Because of my cat. So,
but we're fine, Doctor.
Okay. Well, let's start at the beginning. I went to St Albans School, which is a rather special school.
Excuse me, Doctor. Doctor, first, let's start. Could you just tell me your name and where you're from, and then tell me what's your specialty, and,
sure.
and then and then a quick thing about your background, your training and so forth.
Okay, my name is David Vinaigrette. I came from Barnet, which is North London, the end of the Black Line, the Northern Line in London. And I went to a school. My father was a doctor, and he specialised in general practice, but he was also a psychiatrist. And he used to go to 3 mental hospitals on a regular basis. And when I was learning to drive, I used to take him to the mental hospitals in order to practice driving.
Oh, so, wow!
From an early age, mental hospitals were not very strange to me. And I went to school in St Albans, which was about an hour's bus drive.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's where Knapsbury is located, isn't it?
As the general population, 2% of people go to a year. 80% of people went to university. 27 of them went to either Oxford or Cambridge. So that's way off the scale for anything normal in England.
Really? Way off the scale for anything normal anywhere. That's.
Actually, about 80% of my year are still in regular contact with each other. Mm-hmm. We either email or Facebook each other regularly. And I've just been in Amsterdam, and where I met a guy from my class at school. Anyway, at the school in St Albans, there was a combined cadet force where people dress up as soldiers and prance up and down with guns, polish their rifles, clean their rifles and polish their shoes. And we mostly didn't want to do this, but always 99% of people in a year went into the combined cadet force. My year was special in that 50% of us got slung out. This is the 1970s, for refusing to get our hair cut.
Okay.
And when I finished with the combined cadet force, we had to do something, and I was approached by Task Force, which is a volunteer group that looks for people to help other people. And previously at the school, there had been somebody who went to visit Opal Whiteley, and I imagine he had now left the school, and they asked me if I would go instead to Knapsbury and visit her once a week.
Okay, now why did they?
They didn't tell me her name was Opal Whiteley. They told me that she was called Princess.
Ah, okay.
And they told me where, and I went to London. Knapsbury's at London Coney, which was about a half an hour's bus drive from school, which was about halfway home as far as I was concerned. So I did my regular bus journey home, but I got en route, and about a 20-minute walk to Knapsbury from the bus stop. And I would walk into the grounds and go to her ward, which was right at the back of the hospital, across a lot of grass and past a lot of buildings. I think her ward was the second floor, and it was a locked ward. Mm-hmm. There were about 55 people in the ward, I think. and she was one of 3 or 4 people that had a bedroom at the back of the ward, so she had a certain amount of privacy at the back. When she went to bed, she...
Whoops. Maybe he'll answer me. Call started, 12:20. Hello? Hello, doctor? Hello, doctor, are you there? Let's see. Hello, doctor, are you there? Can you hear me? Now I can see him, but I can't hear him. Oh no. This is, hello, doctor? Gosh, somehow I can't hear you. And I was trying to make the screen where I could see you better, and then they ended the call, and then I am back on my Skype, but it's on my computer. I'm going to hang this up, doctor, and call you back if you can hear me. So I'll hang that up. In that now, I can still see myself, but can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. So I don't know why you can't see me.
That was fascinating what you were telling me about how when you were learning to drive. Now, how old would you have been then? In the U.S., a kid would have been like 15, maybe 14 at that time.
No, I was probably 16. The time that I spent about 3, maybe 4 years visiting Opal and visiting Princess. It's strange for me to call her Princess. I never did.
I know everybody in Britain that I've talked to like that. Mm-hmm.
She was. I always referred to her as Princess. I called her Princess. I would send her postcards. I would write to Princess. I talked to her. I talked to my family as Princess. I never ever called her Opal.
and nobody did.
I don't know where you lost me. Did you? I said I went to the hospital
bedroom.
And her ward was a locked ward up on the second floor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether you heard that. Did you hear where?
Yes, that was right. Now, what were all the wards locked, or why was she in a locked ward?
I don't know. I don't know what percentage of wards were locked, but her ward was definitely locked. I would ring a bell, and then somebody would come and open the door and let me in. And it's a great big vast room. You have to understand there's a seating area with TV.
Sure.
And there's 50 beds in this one room, and her room is a little room at the back, which is just big enough for a bed and not very much more.
Right.
And she would come, and we would sit down at a table and talk. We'd talk for about an hour every day, every time I went, and I would go once a week.
Okay, once a week. Now you said that your school sent you to see her. Was it your school?
No, it was task force that sent me to see her.
Okay.
At the time that people who were still in the cadet force were prancing around the soldiers, then I would go to visit Princess, and it was on my way home. So it was about halfway between on my hour's bus drive home. So I would get off the bus halfway, go and see her, and then get back on the bus and carry on home.
Okay.
What they told me was that there's not very many people in her ward that can talk. Most of the women there were just howling making crying noises.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them couldn't put a sentence together.
Right.
And what they told me at task force was, this woman needs input. She needs someone to talk to. She's in a locked ward and she's got nobody to talk to.
Wow.
And what would she would tell me that she goes in the morning to the library. She had permission to go to the library, when she would sit down there and read three newspapers. She would read the Times and the Telegraph and probably the Guardian. I don't know. And I would find out I would listen to the news and find out what was going on, and we would quite often talk about the stuff in the news. The idea was to talk about anything. It really didn't matter what we talked about, but just so that she would have someone to talk. Every now and again, she would always complain about how they treated her, that they kept her locked up, that she didn't want to be there, that she had irritation on her skin and pimples and things like that. And she told me it was because of the medication she was receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my dad, and he said that all sorts of drugs that are used in psychiatry do give people skin irritation and small growths on their skin, and it seems likely that they are giving her stuff.
Just for your note, Doctor, I'm familiar with most of this. I spent almost 30 years working in the Oregon mental health system, starting out with people with schizophrenia, and then the last 10 or so, 15 years with people who had autism. So, and a lot of what I did then in the early days was I kind of specialized in people who had been institutionalized for a long time. And I would bring them out, set them up in a apartment, make sure somebody brought their medications over once or twice a day, make sure somebody took them to the grocery store, and make sure they had a telephone number that they could call if they got nervous, anxious, before something really escalated. And if you can keep people fed and with a decent sleep and give them a warm line they can call where they know somebody on the other end will be sympathetic, most people can be out of the hospital, and that's how I got interested in her.
Well, obviously they've closed down these places, and I'm sure she didn't really need to be in there. But when she was institutionalized, it was different. The people were considered to be mad and needed to be locked up and kept away from people. Whereas my father did exactly the opposite. His main job in psychiatry was assessing people whether they needed to be locked up against their wishes, and they needed 2 signatures, and one was his signature. And what he generally would do was go and persuade the person to go involuntary.
Right.
Now, and that's a completely different thing, because if you go involuntary, then you're stuck in there for a month. But any time after a month, you can leave if you want to. Whereas when you're locked up on a compulsory order, then you need to go through a whole system. Right. If you want to go out, and you don't have any rights anymore.
Right. Yes.
I think that Princess, on one occasion, a long time previously, they had one attempt to get her out. I don't know very much about it, and I don't even know where I heard about it. But I think it wasn't very successful. I don't know what happened, and she ended up back in. I don't think she was out for very, very long. I don't think, if she'd walked out and gone on a bus, she probably even though she was on a ward, she could have probably done it any time, because she would go out to the library.
Okay.
I did wonder, but I was a bit too young to really get involved in this, what she was doing there. I hadn't been visiting her very long when she told me about her book.
Okay.
And this must have been around about 1987, something like that.
Okay.
So it was at 1968.
Or 78.
68, something like that.
Okay.
68, something like that. I went to the St Albans City Library, and I found her book in the library, and I took it out.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that I was struck by it was the similarity between the photograph of the young woman in the book and this lady that I was visiting. Although there was obviously a large number of years between them,
Mm-hmm.
I was convinced it was the same lady.
Sure. Okay. Uh-huh. So how old were you about this time?
I was about 15, 16, 17, 18.
Okay, and
I carried on visiting her after I finished school for a while.
And the task force, explain again what that was. Was that like what we call the civilian corps here in the United States, which
I really don't know very much about it. I just know that one of the options for doing stuff through the school was task force.
Got it.
They contacted me. They gave me her name, where she was, and I went there. And I didn't ever report back to them or get involved in them. And it's only when I started talking to you that I thought, maybe I should have told them sometime that I'd left school and they should send somebody else. But but they probably did. They probably did anyway. They probably knew when I left school. But I don't even remember where they were or anything. They sent me, and I carried on going. I carried on going for over 3 years, I think.
Wow.
When I went on holiday, I would send her postcards.
Oh.
I would write to Princess. I would tell her where I was and what I was doing. When I was out the country and couldn't visit her or something.
Mm-hmm.
She told me her name was Françoise Orléans de Bourbon. She told me that she was from the French royal family.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't really tell me very much in that direction, other than the name. And I seem to remember when I took the book out of the city library, that the first letter of every flower, if you put it together, spelt Françoise or something like that.
Right.
Which was intriguing. It was written a long time ago, but yet it had these flowers spelt out her name.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a sort of something very special about it, something very mysterious about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I did think it was very sad that she was stuck up in this hospital forever,
Mm-hmm.
and that she'd probably been there for far too long to be able to get out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I didn't really think she could survive on her own out in the big wide world.
Yeah, after that many years. Yeah, that's really.
I know that she'd been in there since she was quite young. As far as I understand it, she was damaged by some German bombing.
Mm-hmm.
You asked me whether I believed she was from the French royal family. Not after I read the book. I think not after I saw the book. She was living her dream or her reality. Her reality was real for her.
Mm-hmm.
That's who she was.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in the hospital called her princess.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, she was a princess in that she was treated differently from 50 other patients in the ward. She was. They appreciated that she needed talking to and looking communicating, and they gave her a room. I think in the circumstances of what was available in Apsbury, maybe they needed to find someone to talk to every day, but
at least somebody did, and that's I'm sure every Opal Whiteley fan greatly appreciates your conversations with her when she was in the hospital, because the little that we have, there's one recording a fellow from Oregon did in 1976, and she sounds not only extremely delusional, but very, very unhappy. And and it's just, the recordings all over the place. But after I used to work with people that had been institutionalized for many years, and after about 30 years, we all adapt to the circumstances we're in. We adapt. So yeah, So how was her mental health in conversation with you? Like this recording we have.
Well, she would. It's like that nobody had the right to keep her there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she was way in that age of not being able to do anything about it all. She would talk quietly. She wouldn't get angry. But she would talk. She would talk about the other people in the ward that mm-hmm. they couldn't talk. They couldn't talk, and the how could they put her in a ward full of people like this that couldn't even talk?
Yes.
She would say stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a
very sad.
Yes. There's a
reading what I read was that when she was a young girl, when she was 18, 19, she would go from town to town and give lectures about the stuff in her book.
She was brilliant.
She obviously. Published. She had a fair amount of gumption in when she was young.
Just to
don't know what.
Just to kind of give you a little insight on that. When she was young, in this country, what we now call the New Age movement, the Theosophical Society, and all those were big, and she was very powerfully influenced by them. They were also active in Christian churches with the idea, and there's some Christian groups these days, it's kind of the name it and claim it. If you can believe it, then you can have it. And she was very strongly influenced by that. Whether or not, what role that played into her deciding or realizing that she was Francois, I don't know. But when she was in Oregon, the lectures she gave, the teachings she gave, were just, the people that went to them just had lifelong memories. She was a captivating speaker when she was young, and of course she knew, so she had that photographic memory where she reeled off facts and figures, and if she read something, she would remember everything there. And it was just, she was so remarkable, but you know, from such a poor, from such an ordinary background, let's say. They weren't dirt poor. They were when they were early on married, and later on they lived more of a middle class or lower middle class life. But yes, she was profoundly influenced by the New Age movement, and I think that's where she got the gumption to leave Oregon. Well, there are two reasons: that she wanted to excel in that, but also her mother had died, and Opal was the oldest child, and she was the girl, and so Opal, under the standards of the times, was expected to raise the other children, and she, by all reports, did not want to do that, and that was one big reason why she left Oregon to go to Los Angeles, where she produced her first book, The Fairyland Around Us. I'm doing an editing of that now to come out with hopefully an anthology of writings throughout her life, introduce people to things that they haven't read before. But yeah, that she definitely believed that whatever you believe, you can achieve. And
you asked me something about in the letter you wrote to me about anti-Semitism.
yes.
Well, she knew I was Jewish,
Mm-hmm.
and when I would sometimes go to Israel, and I would send her postcards from Israel.
Wow.
And she never said anything negative, not about Jews or about Israel, or about me going there. To me, she never said anything negative about it.
No, that's
I'd
really.
asked her if she'd had the letters, if the postcards.
Mm-hmm.
So I never had anything. She didn't really talk about religion at all.
That's really interesting, because there's been a writer that made quite a bit about her and anti-Semitism, but in her younger life, the book "The Fairyland Around Us," you can find it online, or you just search for "The Fairyland Around Us," but that book is it's not Christian. It's got the word God mentioned maybe 400 times, but she was around a couple of her supporters in Los Angeles were Jewish women. One of them, Mrs. Lasky, whose husband was really big in the movies, and so the Fairyland Around Us, you could give that to any Jewish parent, you could give it to a Muslim parent, and they wouldn't find anything objectionable in there. It only mentions Jesus or Christ 3 times, and each time it's in connection with a date, like so and so lived 500 years before the birth of Christ. It's a date. Yeah. It's not. There's nothing in there saying like, I love my Lord Jesus. There's nothing. It's not a. It's a Abrahamic book perhaps, but it's Fairyland Around Us. But like I say, and I think she was so and the anti-Semitism stuff doesn't really crop up until, at least in my knowledge, it may have been earlier, but until she's been in Knapsbury for a while. And there's one letter that says that a couple of the nurses are Jewish and they were very much against her. But anyway, her history was not. She didn't come out on that all the time.
Well, I think she did demand respect from the nurses and expected them to treat her. She expected them to call her princess, and she expected them to be nice to her. Okay. Maybe she came up. So maybe she was rubbed up wrong by some nurses that didn't treat her properly. I think that probably as time went on, they got better. Mm-hmm. I think that the place was more relaxed in later years. Mm-hmm. The last time I saw her was around about 1979, which was the year I moved to Israel.
Okay.
And I was sort of a bit frightened to contact her, or to try and contact her after that. I thought she was probably quite old, and I really didn't want them to tell me that she had died.
Yeah. That is fascinating. So you and hearing about your relationship, because it's neat. Yours is the only relationship story I know of those Knapsbury years. She may have had friends who visited her, or
if you can find out a volunteer group called Task Force in St Albans, they probably still exist. And if they don't, then St Albans School may know something about it. I wasn't the first and probably not the last person that they sent to visit her. There was certainly somebody before me. And I went there when I was about 15, maybe 15 or 16, and I was born 1953, so 53, 63, 68 was when I first started going to see her. So before 66, 67, there was probably somebody. I'm pretty sure there was somebody else before me that just left school, and that's why they asked me to go.
Do you know?
Certainly sent by task force from St Albans.
Do you know if they were sent to speak with her because she was they believed she was a princess, or had been a writer, or had?
No. Just because she was. They also sent people to visit old people in houses,
Mm-hmm.
old people who lived alone. I'm trying to remember. I'm thinking about 50 years ago, or
Sure.
I left school in 1972.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about between 68 and 72. It's a bit hard to remember everything from back there, but they divided people up into sending out some people to visit old people in their houses,
Mm-hmm.
and I got Princess. That was just the luck of the draw.
What a great program! We need to have that in this country now, because there's so many aging people that could use somebody just dropping by.
I think it does happen here in Israel.
Okay, in Israel, yes.
There's a lot of volunteer groups doing all sorts of things,
Mm-hmm.
taking people food, inviting people for Friday evening meal. My brother didn't have anywhere to go for Passover, and a local group invited him to a local family invited him to spend the evening with them.
Oh, nice. Nice. We've really lost that volunteer spirit over here. How do you think she was seen by the other patients, or what do you remember about that?
Well, as I said, of about 50...
Oh, she was in that ward with so
50,
many people
50,
who were... Yeah.
From about 55 people there, only about 3 of them could talk.
Oh, God.
And the others didn't have much to say anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think she had much communication with any of them. Maybe one or two of the other people that had private rooms at the back who could talk, but I never talked to them, so I don't know very much about that. If she had any communication with anybody in the ward other than the nurses, it would be in one of the other 2 people who had private rooms at the back.
Okay. Okay.
The private rooms weren't terribly private; they were sort of half open.
Right.
I could from the front from the seating area, I could see her bed
Mm-hmm.
in her private room.
Yes.
So it wasn't terribly private. But
I've seen pictures.
More private than all the rows of beds that were in the main ward.
Oh, okay. That's good then. So yeah, sure, because most of the wards have those rows of beds, and then the few private rooms, either for long-standing patients or patients that are well liked or something.
And there was just 3 rooms at the back. That's all there was.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to remember the name of the ward, but I think it's Cherry or something like that.
Oak. I've heard they were named after trees, and it seems like her ward might have been Oak or something else.
Yeah, it might have been Oak.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the names going past coming up, but it was the second. It was went up 1 flight of stairs.
Mm-hmm.
There were wards on the ground floor. There were these really long corridors. You can see on Wikipedia. You can see pictures of. There's loads of pictures of Knapsbury. You can see long corridors with sort of brownish. The tube in London in the old days.
Yes, they published. I don't know if you can see it. I guess when they were closing it, it goes from 1905 to 1999. It's a really good small book done by the staff and the people. You might be able to find it online.
Those are black and white pictures, but there's a website that for old mental hospitals in England with some colour pictures.
Oh, I'll look for that.
If I'll send you the link if I find it. I saw it the other day.
Hello?
Yeah, it's easy to find. It'll be in my recent text things. But I saw these pictures, and it really brought it back to me what it was like.
Mm-hmm.
I went up a flight of stairs and along a very long corridor, and then turned left, and on the right-hand side was this locked door. I would knock on the door, or I would ring the bell, and somebody would let me in.
Okay. Interesting.
And we would sit down. And we would sit down at a table there, and talk for a while until I felt it was time to go home and do my homework.
Do you remember what she liked to talk about?
I didn't understand.
Do you remember what she liked to talk about the most? Did she ever talk about Oregon or anything?
No, never met. No, I think that she didn't want to be called by that name, which was nothing to do with her. It was it wasn't her past. It was something that they tried to put on her. But there's a certain amount of ambiguity here, because on the one hand, she said it was the book that she wrote, but the book she wrote was about Oregon. Well, no, obviously. She said she was taken as a baby to Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
She was taken from France as a baby. So she didn't deny that she grew up in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, she published the book there. I was quite surprised to read about this thing about that her childhood diary had been torn up into little bits and had to be pieced back together again.
Right.
I think maybe lots of people do this. I think maybe it's not so surprising.
No,
that, people are embarrassed or ashamed of what they did when they were younger.
Well, and the gender dynamics in a family, that the Whiteley family was a family of 4 girls. Now, if you have a family of 4 boys, what are they going to do? They're going to get into fights. That's what they're going to do. You get 4 girls together, they're not going to physically fight, but they are going to tear up each other's stuff. And I have talked to 3 or 4 women who either confessed to me that they tore up their sister's diary when they were about the same age, middle school, and or else one of their sisters tore up their diary or something. It's just kind of the ultimate act of sibling revenge in when you're a kid. So and I found this is a blown up 8x11. I found a piece of her diary out in the town that she used to live in, and she gave a handful of pieces of her diary that were torn up to friends, and this was one of them. And what happened was somebody on the original text, they tore it long ways, and then they tore it like that. Now I've just torn up all the questions I was going to ask you. After reading, and I do think her sisters did that. Of course they're 7 and 9 years old, so they don't know that they're tearing up a literary masterpiece. And the whole story of the reconstruction of the diary is interesting and bizarre in a way. All of those, and the Atlantic Monthly, I think, was in Boston. The people in Boston, in America, we feel like the people in Boston and at the Harvard and Cambridge, they look down on the rest of America, especially the western part. And and they always believed that Opal couldn't be an ordinary child from an ordinary family that did lumbering and gold mining because she was too bright. she had to have been from some kind of noble blood. And there were books that Tarzan is a story about a baby who's really a child of an English lord who was raised in the jungle by apes and then becomes Lord of the Jungle. But there were girls' books in this country with the same kind of story, a long lost child of some highborn personage, but they rise to the top.
Of course, Long Lost is a very literary, has a long literary background. You don't have to go very far back on TV to that. In Dynasty, they brought in the long lost sister to save the program.
Our family watched the show Dallas.
I think in Dallas they also had a long lost brother.
No, it was the father who was thought dead who came back. Yeah, who came back. Right. He was thought to be dead, and he came back and then was exposed as a fake.
Actually, if you want a comedy version, it happens in soap as well.
It's a great meme to put around. Did she ever talk about World War II or what she did in World War II? There's some.
No. She never really talked to me about the States at all.
No, in Britain. In Britain.
I don't think I got any background stuff from her. Not about England.
Okay.
She mentioned, she did say that she'd been living in London. I'm going back so many years; it's really hard to remember.
Sure, but did she
what we talked about?
Did she ever imply that she had a role in the war effort, like codes, mathematical codes, or anything like that? Because
no.
Later on, she told a couple of people that she had helped with the war effort, trying to figure out codes. And Opal was brilliant in codes. She was brilliant in math. If you read the diary and the Fairyland Around Us, and you're just looking for the math, it was easy for me to put together a map of every place that she mentioned in the diary, because she tells exactly how many steps she takes to go most places. I mean, she counts steps, she counts caterpillars, she counts clouds, she counts everything.
Do you know from what year she was in Knapsbury?
1948 to when she died. 1993 was that, or 19, something like that.
Okay, so she was there in 48, and I started seeing her in 68.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know if she'd had a lobotomy in Knapsbury?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I don't think she told me that.
Okay, I've got a letter. The first consulting psychiatrist that saw her wrote a letter to to Mrs. Woodruff, who was an aristocrat. She had a title, and she was a friend of Opal's. And she's the one who actually called the mental health police, so to speak, to go in and check on Opal. And at the time, the most brilliant, the better, she did what any good, well-educated person at the time would do, because there was enormous faith in psychiatry. There was a lot of faith in these new methods of lobotomy, especially the transorbital one in the eye, and the medicines. And so it was really thought, especially after World War II, that mental health psychiatry was going to make was going to help mankind tremendously. And there were thousands of people, especially just swept in.
I think that JFK's sister had one.
Yes. She had the old-fashioned kind, and that was one of the things with the surgeon and the complete brain surgery. That was one of the Walter Freeman pioneered this transorbital one. You can find videos of it on YouTube, but yes, and then they did it to like 50,000 women in the United States, and for some reason they didn't keep track of the number of men. They kept track of the number of women. They did it too. But anyway,
well, I know Naps we had about 3 times as many women as men.
Mm-hmm.